when they actually spend their time listening to this show. What does it mean? It means we're winning.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive through any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live on Twitch every Wednesday. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. Show is at 7 p.m. Pacific. Podcast listeners, get over here. You can support this project at eplex.store. Just either buy something there or join the membership. It's like Patreon, but it's on eplex.store. We get a little bit better split. Plus, you get a discount on all the items in the store and our undying love. I'm producer Dave. You can find me on Grindr, as many have.
And I'm HK Perrin. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social.
Fuck yeah. How you doing this week?
I'm doing really well. I've been working really hard on my email thing, and it's making a lot of progress.
I've been not working very hard on any email thing, but I've been busy. I didn't put out our tech show, but everybody check out our tech show. How the tech are you? The latest episode will certainly be out by Wednesday when this hits the or by Friday when this hits the podcast apps. So this week, there's usually nobody to root for, and this week I say in my view, there's like 70% of somebody to root for, because this is Lex Fridman, and he has David Pakman on his show. HK, did you hold to your our agreement that you wouldn't watch this?
I did. I have not seen this, and I haven't even listened to David Pakman talk about this. So, I'm completely unaware of everything that happens in this.
So what I was hoping when I found out this happened is that David Pakman would have been the first person to be like, dude, I'm not talking to you for 4 hours. And that didn't happen. It's 3.5 hours. I really wish somebody would be like, dude, I'm not going to sit there and talk to you for that long. That would be...
And not only that, but like in the title, I can see the title here. It's got the thing that I really want to hear is them talk about like wokeism, quote unquote, which wokeism just means like inclusion. That's literally all it means. Well, I mean,
it's the thing
it could
that they
mean whatever
used to,
you want it to mean.
It's the thing that they used to call social justice and the thing that they used to call political correctness. They just keep changing the word.
Yeah, it's just being nice to people, and I want to hear someone actually talk about like, why are the Republicans so against, or conservatives in general? Why are conservatives in general just so against just being nice to people? So
what we'll do is the last segment before we switch over to the red light this week, we'll go ahead and make sure that we skip ahead to that. And it looks like
Okay,
the segment is about 15, 20 minutes. So we'll make sure right at around maybe a little after 8 p.m. Pacific our time, we'll switch over to that and make sure we get that in before we turn the lights red. And then we can have our leave of this awful video too by then. Anyway, there's too much chit chat. That's not what anybody's here for. We're not here to talk about ourselves. That's in red light. Here it is. I skipped the intro part where he tells us something about David Pakman.
Differences to you between terms like liberal, Democrat, left-wing, leftist, progressive, socialist, communist, Marxist, far left, center left, all of these labels. Is there interesting distinctions between them?
Yeah, there's two sets of distinctions. One is if you just want to say, let's define each of these as political terms, they're all different terms. You can be a progressive ideologically, but not be a member of the Democratic Party. Many say the Democratic Party isn't even really very progressive. So these are certainly terms that we could define in order to have a conversation about the next thing, kind of as a precursor to a conversation.
Oh my God, they're already in the conversation about the conversation part, and we've been watching for literally 15 seconds.
The terms are used in order to tag someone with a certain ideology that's not really linked to policy or any particular political question, but they can be used positively or negatively to just kind of say, here is the image of this individual that I have in my mind. So like Marxist is right now very popularly being used by some on the right to attack Democrats. There's very few actual Marxists, certainly not in positions of power in the United States, but even among the general population. So I think it's important to distinguish, are we defining these terms because we want to compare and contrast the ideas that a particular group might bring to the discussion, or are we using them as insults or to stifle conversation? They're terms that can be used to start conversation or to stop it.
And the use of those terms is evolving rapidly month by month. So the term leftist, I think, is a relatively popular term now to use in the negative context to describe what an outraged left-wing commentator.
I think what you're kind of grasping onto is that there's probably some...
This is going to be fun because I don't listen to Dave Pakman anymore. I don't really like his content that much. I used to listen to him a lot, but I've sort of, I don't know, the fucking too much. I think too much, like there's just too much politeness in his game for me now. And, but this is going to be really funny because Dave Pakman ain't a dummy. And I think Lex has been presented to us as a very smart person, but I think he's actually kind of dumb. And so this is going to be like really fun watching Dave just explain like very basic stuff to fucking Lex.
Also, he's saying it's popular to use leftist as an insult. Like, I describe myself as a leftist. Like, I consider myself more of a leftist than a liberal.
Right, but they're not talking about you.
But like, if you're talking about like someone using it as an insult, like that's just people who disagree with the policies and viewpoints on the left. Like,
so I think people.
Who cares if someone on some right wing person uses leftist as an insult?
So I think when people use it as I think when people use it as an insult, they're the people who think that a leftist is just more liberal than a liberal, and they may just think that it's a liberal with a Molotov cocktail. A liberal who was mean to them on Twitter, or like, and we're not going to get into the same dumb conversation about distinctions that Lex wants to get in with Dave here. If Dave Pakman wants to get into that discussion, he can get into it. But if you and me get into that discussion, I'm going to bash my head against the keyboard.
All right, let's keep going on then.
Set of ideas that would apply to most of those who consider themselves to be on the left. Mm-hmm. The discussion of how that term is mostly being used is not about policy ideas. You're accurately kind of identifying that. And it does seem like progressive is no longer being used as a smear and leftist is being used as a smear more at this point.
Okay. But sometimes some of these terms are useful. Like, can we try to pick the terms that are useful, like liberal and progressive and Democrat?
But those are like almost all the fucking, those are like a very close Venn diagram in a lot of cases. I hope Dave says that, because this is the part, this shit, actually, I hate this shit. This is the politics talk that I don't like. There's two things I don't like to talk about. I don't really like talking about horse race politics, like Democrats versus Republicans. And I don't like this like quibbling over like terms.
Yeah. He said it's useful to talk about these things. I completely disagree. It is hardly ever useful to talk about labels. Basically,
Right.
The only time it's useful to talk about labels is when you're talking about fascism.
Or if you're like at a dinner party and you don't really want to get into politics with somebody, you're going to use a shorthand for your political beliefs and then you're going to walk away. I don't know, because I talk about politics like for a living now. So the last thing I want to do at a fucking dinner party is talk to some idiot, even if they're an idiot on the left, about politics, or like somebody who I just don't want to do it. And so I'll just be like, oh, I'm a leftist, but I'm actually here to eat dinner and drink alcohol. hope they'll leave me alone. My God.
Liberal and progressive. Is there an interesting, definable distinction between liberal and progressive to you?
That's maybe one of the most interesting ones. 10 years ago, liberal often meant what now we mean by progressive. More recently, the progressive socialist leaning part of the political spectrum has started to use liberal to mean Joe Biden, to mean someone who is not really left enough. So liberal is very interesting because I remember talking with my audience years ago, maybe 8 years ago or something like that, where I identified I'm going to now use the term progressive more commonly to describe my own beliefs because liberal has now been made a smear. It's being shifted into something else. And it also means more of like a center-left politics. Mm-hmm. So it's changed in some sense by necessity, by force, and also because the spectrum has shifted to some degree.
So the term liberal has evolved.
Oh my God. So here's the difference. How critical are you of capital and capitalism? There's the difference. Fucking move on.
Liberal meaning some kind of embodiment of the mainstream Democratic Party, almost.
To some degree. Sometimes I'm written off by, within my space, there are all sorts of shades of gray, which I'm sure we can talk about where I am versus should be, could be, or am wrongly placed. And sometimes an attack on me is he's just a lib, meaning I'm not left enough. I'm not progressive.
My God, I lean into that. I'm like, there's a command. I forget what it is in the chat. It says you can type it in and it's like Gay Dave is every communist's favorite shit lib. Like
list wherever else you want to go. So yeah, the problem with a lot of these terms, and the
problem with this is if you worry about it,
who call into my show, is that unless we actually define them each time, they very often mean very different things to different people and often come with an agenda attached to them. And so I find that they often stifle meaningful conversation rather than encourage it.
Well, don't worry, you're on the Lex show, so a meaningful conversation is going to be really tough to have, Dave. Real tough to have.
I mean, I agree with Pakman here about these labels are very often completely useless. It is completely useless to say, like, well, are you a liberal or are you a progressive? Like, that's useless. It doesn't tell me anything about you.
In fact, if the person asks me that question, I'm going to assume they're an idiot.
I'll tell you my policies. Not a huge fan of capitalism. Does that narrow it down?
Do you sense that there's a drifting of what is the threshold to be a progressive? Or should we use progressive synonymously with democratic socialist?
I think we should not use it synonymously with democratic socialist. And this is where there's another...
Well, no, that's because these are two different terms. Yeah, good job.
Confusion and a political confusion. So we'll first talk about the linguistic one. Social democracy versus democratic socialism. Very similar words in a different order, okay? The way I operate is democratic socialism is actually a form of socialism where one would seek to socialize ownership of the means of production, as an example. Social democracy is a very highly regulated form of capitalism, the likes of which we would see in Northern Europe, Denmark, etc. These are very different things. I associate progressivism in 2023 with social democracy and would consider democratic socialism a form of actual socialism that is different. We're no longer talking about a capitalist organization of society.
So transition from one to the other is a fundamental shift in how society operates then.
Absolutely. And when you talk about social democracy, you're talking about socializing a couple more things than we socialize in most modern capitalist countries. I had this conversation with Patrick Bet-David recently. Social democracy is...
Thanks for putting a picture of fucking that fucking dude who looks like he's about to fire me on the screen, Lex. Appreciate it.
Already in the United States. We've socialized some healthcare in the sense of like the VA and Medicaid, et cetera. We're talking about socializing a couple more things still in a capitalist country. Democratic socialism would be something beyond that. And as someone who is not a democratic socialist myself, I'm maybe not the best advocate for explaining exactly how that system would function, but it would have some version of socializing ownership of the means of production, businesses, et cetera.
So you mentioned you appeared on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David. The debate was pretty intense. I should say I personally enjoyed it. I thought actually you did well, and I thought Patrick did well, and it was a good conversation. I think there was a little bit of tension.
Yeah.
And I thought that Patrick actually...
Now they're talking about how great it was that Dave got to have a conversation with somebody else. This discussion of the conversation is like a recurring theme in all of this. And I just wish somebody would go on there and shut this down. Like, go on one of these platforms and shut this shit down and be like, I already understand, sir, that it's good to have conversations. Could we maybe talk about something else?
I'm with you on that.
Pakman's not dispositionally inclined to do that. And anybody who is dispositionally inclined to do that, these people are terrified of.
Disagree with the internet. I thought Patrick just took on a kind of devil's advocate. Like he was purposely being stubborn to bring out the best in you. But the internet thought that he's being stubborn, not being open to your ideas. I thought the tension between ideas, I think a lot of the tension had to do probably with Donald Trump and Trump supporters.
That certainly could be the case. And people wrote to me the full gamut of everything you can imagine, from this was your best thing you've ever done in public to you got humiliated and your mother should have aborted you. Okay. So everything in between. So, take your pick. But, the most interesting feedback I got was from people who asked me after, was it incredibly tense and awkward, and because it seemed so combative. And I think I'm so used to those types of tensions in the discussions that I have that it's very comfortable to me. It's not like afterwards it's there's a grudge or it's tense or whatever the case may be. I'm very comfortable. Just I disagree with people and that's it. So I did not find anything that happened inappropriate. I disagreed with a lot of the things he said, certainly.
So you've also spoken with Michael Knowles, I think, about the idea of what is a woman. Can you speak broadly about your conversations with the people you disagree with? Some of the cases, it feels like...
Yeah, you got 3.5 more fucking hours. Yeah, I guess you could speak broadly on any topic, sir.
The conversations have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different things, and I'm the first to tell you that depending on who I'm talking to, I go in with a different attitude about how, quote, seriously I'm taking it, in the sense of whether I think it's going to be a deep policy discussion versus whether it's going to be more of a performance for an audience that is expecting a certain thing. And I think there's different types of shows. When I was interviewed by this guy, Jesse Lee Peterson in Los Angeles, it's very different, for example, than when I'm talking to Patrick Bet-David, just to give two examples. I think the reason I stopped doing the Michael Knowles show was the number of threats I would get after the fact. That's really the reason. I was glad to engage with him to the extent that the interviews were interesting and, we could organize it reasonably efficiently. But
send me in. I'll give those people a reason to send me death threats. Send me in to talk to Michael Knowles.
The reason I stepped away was sort of the aftermath.
You and me both, man.
I did find...
Fuck that guy.
Yeah. That would be pretty much my disposition the whole time. I wouldn't be like, well, aren't these interesting ideas about somebody else's basic humanity? I'd be like, hey, fuck you.
Yep.
And that would pretty much be, I'd be like, bye.
Him to be someone who was abundantly clear about his view and where he comes from. And while I could not possibly disagree more with him in terms of politics and culture and our backgrounds, everything is just so different. I found it easy to engage in the conversation just because of how upfront and clear he was about what his beliefs were.
But the number of threats is too much.
Yeah, it was just too much. And this, I don't know how much you saw about this.
I will say,
Twitter dust-up.
you were talking about his niceness. When you're engaging with someone who is a fascist, you can't be nice. You can't be civil. You have to call them out.
You can start that way. You can start that way and see if they're willing to give. But as soon as you figure out that this person, they're not going to give you an inch, then actually at that point, you should just be like, well, I'm done wasting my time with you, actually. But if you'd allow, I'd say my piece and then be like, I'm done wasting my time with you. You are a bad person. Your community is bad people. You're spreading bad ideas and you're terrifying.
Yep. Yeah. And I think if you don't do that, it doesn't help anyone.
Right. It's just, isn't it nice that we had this conversation? And I'm like, well, not really.
Yeah. Isn't it nice that we talked about whether other people deserve rights?
Isn't it nice that I was so polite to you when we debated the basic fundamental humanity of someone else?
Peaked with Donald Trump Jr. tweeting about me, and then declining from there.
Oh, let's talk through it. I didn't see it.
Okay.
I have to understand, the way you study Shakespeare, I have to study your Twitter. Right. I have to understand somewhat.
Wait, shut the fuck up.
It's mostly sarcasm. I mean, here's the thing, and I know that there are people who will say, David, you're dealing with such serious issues. It's really not okay not to take everything you do completely seriously. Yeah. But my view is, it's so incredible that I've, between chance and timing and so different things, fallen into a position where this is what I do professionally, and it's a career and it's financially sustainable and all these different things. I don't want to end up taking myself too seriously because I recognize the timing and luck and all of these other things. And this could have gone a completely different way. So my approach to a lot of this is, let's not take ourselves too seriously. And in particular on Twitter, a platform that, the degree to which it should be taken very seriously maybe has changed over time. I'm always sort of thinking a little bit tongue in cheek on Twitter.
So what happened with Donald Trump Jr.?
Or
the full arc of it?
Yeah, give you a 1 minute arc, and then we can pick whichever parts.
Lex is already mad that he said, I'm only going to explain these to you in 1 minute. Lex is like, well, fuck.
After a mass shooting, now you might say there's like 2 or 3 a day. You're correct. After
Lex would never say that.
Nashville mass shooting at a Christian school, I tweeted snarkily, tongue in cheek, to point that thoughts and prayers not only aren't particularly useful after a shooting, they also don't prevent shootings, that there's some confusion about how there would be a shooting at a Christian school, given that it is a place where prayer is taking place. I think I jokingly said something like, were they not praying enough or correctly?
In my deep journalistic integrity.
You have it.
I have your tweet. Beautiful. This is the only display of journalistic integrity I will show today. Okay. And I have a couple of responses.
That's probably the only integrity you're going to show.
Which I regret.
At least Lex knows that he's a joke.
I would love to, because it's such a interesting decision. Because when you tweet something, one of the things I've also learned is you don't often understand how it's going to be read. It's going to be analyzed, like I mentioned, Shakespeare.
You don't say.
There's the use of
Lex just finally figured out that when you say something, you don't actually get to control how other people respond to it. There's big progress in the marketplace of ideas here, buddy. Big fucking progress.
Certain words that you regret saying in a certain kind of way, maybe just because it wasn't as eloquent, as powerful, it didn't actually convey the thing.
Anybody go check my tweets and replies and ask yourself if I worry about how people are going to take what I say to other people on Twitter.
Or is it distraction to the main message, all that kind of stuff. Okay, the actual tweet is very surprising that there would be a mass shooting at a Christian school, given that lack of prayer is often blamed for these horrible events. Is it possible they weren't praying enough or correctly despite being a Christian school? And a lot of
they didn't pray hard enough.
Retweeted that, which I'm assuming was criticism. So Colin Wright wrote, I used to consider you a reasonable progressive, but you clearly devolved into partisan hackery. I'm an atheist, yet cannot begin to fathom using the murder of children and adults at a Christian school as an opportunity to dunk on the concept of prayer.
Anybody who doesn't know,
He wasn't
anybody who doesn't
dunking on
know,
the
Colin
concept of
Wright, anybody who
prayer.
doesn't know, Colin Wright works for Skull Measuring Quarterly. He works for Killette. He's a writer for Killette. He's a fucking phrenologist.
Well, Colin Wright is a fucking idiot. If he thinks that Pakman was dunking on the concept of prayer in that.
And you responded, I'm dunking on the people who sent
You should
thoughts and prayers.
never try to explain yourself to someone like Colin Wright. Ever.
Nothing else. And
The
shooting
response should be, fuck you, go measure a skull.
continue. Okay, I'm sure there's a lot of other interactions.
There's
like
a
this.
few other 100,000
interactions.
So do you want the arc leading to the
Yes,
deleting?
please. Sorry.
So
I just
basically,
wanted to display.
do you know
the
what
depth.
time of day I tweeted the original one? I feel like it was in the afternoon or evening on a Monday.
3:42 p.m. on 27th, March 27th.
Which was a Monday. Okay.
Monday.
So basically I tweet that and then I finished the day and
So you tweet and then you go on with your day.
I might have looked once at Twitter and it had 2,000 likes and a few people saying, this might have missed the mark, but it's sort of like it's one of my 20,000 tweets. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up the next morning. My baby daughter did not sleep till 7:30 the way I would like. So she's up at 6 a.m. and I get up. And
Baby daughter's complaining about the
starting to
tweet.
eat breakfast. And I glance at my phone and I'm starting to, this was when verified meant a different thing than it means now. I'm seeing all these verified accounts that are, quote tweeting it and demanding a retraction and whatever. And I go, okay, this looks like it's getting some attention. I then continue about my day. Around noon, I hear from my dad that he got 100 messages from "you should have aborted your son" to "we're going to find all of you" to whatever else. My dad has no idea what's going on. He's like, I don't know what this is, but I have 100 DMs to everything else you can imagine. And I start to get emails about, your Jewish faith, this and that and the other thing. And so at that point, to me,
Oh, it sounds like the kind of people you should apologize to.
It sounds like he pissed off the right people. That is exactly who you want to piss off. So why retract it?
this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so I deleted the tweet. And I really regret doing that because over the 48 hours that followed, yes, the attacks escalated. It went through Candace Owens and then at foxnews.com, Newsmax, kind of peaking with Donald Trump Jr. And it was horrible. I mean, thousands and thousands of okay. But once I told my audience about what happened, I got thousands of messages from people saying, David, only someone who doesn't know you and is determined to interpret this in the worst possible faith would think you're blaming kids who died for getting shot. Of course you weren't doing that. I wish you hadn't deleted it so that it would still be up and you would now see the tide kind of turning on it. This was not a fun 3 days regardless, but I do regret having deleted it because it was I wanted to do the quickest thing I thought I could to get people to stop trying to find family members and send them threats. And so around noon, that's what I did. And the truth is the threats didn't stop anyway because everybody had screenshotted it. And I do wish I had left it up.
I mean, is there some degree, maybe stepping outside yourself, that you regret tweeting that, in that it feeds the mockery engine that fuels Twitter? So, like, does that tweet really represent what you believe?
It absolutely represents the disgust with a politics that includes saying we can't.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Can we pause it for a second? So, Pakman at the beginning of this said that he was being sarcastic. Like this, he said that he is mostly sarcastic on Twitter, and he also said explicitly that this tweet was sarcastic. And Lex just asked him if that was an accurate representation of what he really believes. Does Lex know what sarcastic means?
So, I mean, not to be fair to Lex, but just to be like precise, I guess. If you're being sarcastic, you are in fact putting what you believe out there generally. The point of good sarcasm is that you're using sarcasm to say what you believe. It's just that people have to realize that you're using sarcasm to tell them what you believe, right?
Well, I think in this case, he was saying sarcastically the opposite of what he believes.
Mm-hmm.
What he believes is prayer doesn't work to stop shootings, right? And he was saying, oh, it's so strange that there was a shooting at a Christian school. Maybe they weren't praying hard enough.
Yeah, we saw that.
So that's very obviously sarcasm. So, like, why is Lex asking this? I mean, is he asking, like, obviously the text of the tweet is not what Pakman believes. Is he asking that, like, the sarcastic intention of the tweet, is that what Pakman believes? Because, like, yes, clearly. I don't know. This is just a really dumb question any way you look at it to me.
But we're willing to point to mental health or say we need more prayer in schools or whatever. 1000% it represents that view. Is it the type of snark and sarcasm that I would use if given an hour to discuss the topic rather than whatever the number of characters is now on Twitter? No, definitely not. And so I am very cognizant of the fact that it was unnecessarily provocative how it was written.
I think I asked a similar question to Ben Shapiro. Do you worry that this style of presentation can turn you from being, a deeply thoughtful, objective political thinker to somebody who is just a partisan hack or partisan, what's a good word? Talking head?
Do you mean with regard to Twitter or the format of my show in general?
So Twitter for now. Let's start with Twitter for now. And can you silo your style of communication on Twitter from being a virus that affects your mind?
Right. I don't have deep thoughts about the Twitter component beyond, I think, across all sorts of disciplines. This is not the best way to most effectively solve problems and figure out solutions to complex issues.
You're talking about Twitter.
Right now I'm talking about Twitter.
Yes.
That being said,
good job, Lex. You figured it out. He just told you that he was talking about Twitter, and you figured out that he was talking about Twitter. So far, Lex's brain is the size of the galaxy.
To some degree, have to adapt our content to the platform that we're using. In the same way that what I post to YouTube is different than what I post to TikTok, what I post to Twitter is also different. Do I think Twitter has been an unmitigated good for society? No. Have I chosen to step into Twitter as one of the ways in which I get my message out with the good and the bad? Yes. And I think that there is a deep conversation to be had there. I think zooming out a little bit in terms of what I do, and I was hoping this would come up because I think it's really interesting. I will often get emails from people who say two things. I will get you would have such a bigger audience if you did X type emails. Mm-hmm. And usually they are plays to sensationalism, salacious and titillating content, more pop culture stuff, etc. On the other hand, it's folks who say, listen, what you're doing really isn't as serious as it could be. And it seems like you could do something more serious. And you should consider doing deep dives. Once it was do a deep dive into Calvin Coolidge. And I was like, nobody will watch that. So it's not.
But isn't the appropriate response, I don't give a fuck about Calvin Coolidge. He dead? That's my response, I suppose. Like, I would ignore all of this noise and I wouldn't waste time during an interview talking about like the random criticisms we get, especially for this show. It's like, oh, well, you're talking about these serious thinkers and all you do is make fun of them. It's like, well, did you see the fucking title of the show and the tagline of the show? What the fuck did you think was going on here? The intent is so clear from the title and the fucking tagline of the show. Like, I would not waste time during an interview on this. In fact, like, by this point, I would already be asking Lex about the people that he's platformed.
Yeah.
That my show is the way it is.
I don't know if that's the reason Pakman went on to his show, though.
Also important to note, we don't know what kind of like agreement Lex sends out to people before they go on his show, like the things that people have to sign. We found out over the years that Brett and Eric both have riders they send out to people if they're not like friends with them. That they'll send out. They're like Brett was sending out, like, for when he was talking about his book, that people would agree to not ask him about his anti-vaccine propaganda, or he if they wouldn't sign it, he wouldn't go on their show. And I would be surprised if Lex doesn't send out some kind of rider to people, like asking them not, or saying that they may not go after him for the people he's platformed and the ideas he's put out there. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't do that.
I'm thinking of all the platforms I'm on, and I'm saying, okay, I want to do a relatively deep dive on the federal budget, and I want to talk about some of the political tomfoolery going on within the post office. And I'm going to do a segment about the wacky rally where Trump said crazy things and made up 3 words and said he endorsed a candidate who's named it, right? I'm crafting that in total to find a balance between, let's build this audience as much as I can in order to have a bigger base to get my message out there, and include the more serious stuff with the hope that there's a little bit of something for everyone. And I'm finding a balance between those two sides of the spectrum. It's a deliberate thing. And I'm aware that if I were producing my show 50 years ago, the balance would probably be different and it would probably change again. If the show was audio only rather than having all these video platforms, it would also be different. But it's a decision that's proactively made to try to get the best and most out of the hour that I'm creating every day.
Well, it just feels like there's an entire machine fed by Twitter and journalism that wants to divide people, and the drama of that division, highlighting the
How many times is he going to ask the same fucking question?
the drama of that division feels like it's a tension with objective, clear thinking sometimes. And so I worry that there's a drug to it. There's too much fun to mock ridiculous people on the other side.
I think you're right about that.
So he just did this one. Oh, here we go.
The focus on ridicule.
He did an Eric Weinstein.
The fact that that is true, to me, supports, I've talked with my audience about, like the old food pyramid, which I guess was like wrong, but let's imagine that there was a pyramid that made sense.
What's at the bottom? Bread?
So they showed the food pyramid, like
Whole grains.
Oh my God. Seriously? You put the food pyramid up.
Lex is the most uninteresting interviewer in the world. He was like, here's the food pyramid. It's like, dude, everybody knows what this. Stop. Like, stop.
It's been a while.
Sugar's on the top. Okay.
Junk food is at the very top. I'm very open with my audience. The vast majority of what I do is the top of that pyramid. And I tell people very openly, I don't consume a lot of the type of content I produce. And I think it's really important to, as a base, be doing critical thinking, epistemology, how do we believe the things we believe, basics about the world. After that, reading history, economics, philosophy, etc. After that, now we're getting into current events. I would mostly be looking at consuming primary source reporting, things like Associated Press, whatever. I know everybody will have a different list of what counts there. After that is when I'd say indulge in some of the commentary type stuff that I do.
I think what he's trying to do right now is excuse that everything he does is clickbait.
But this is again, it's kind of a weak defense of what he's doing. Like, this is why these people, like, for example, they would never have Sam Cedar on, because Sam would be like, yeah, he's like, I do a long form interview that goes out as the podcast, and then we just do culture war shit and dunk on people and take phone calls. I'm not telling you to watch my show. Like, you don't have to watch it. I don't have to defend it to you.
Full enough to make it into that, but I'm very open. And really what I try to do on my show often is, in being that at the top of the pyramid, tell people there's all this other stuff that should be forming your foundation that I hope you're consuming in addition to just watching me. And I'm very open with my audience about that.
What about the shape, the dynamics, the characteristics of your audience? Is there some degree to which you're, through mocking maybe Republicans, that there's a lean to that audience, and then you become captured by the audience? Do you worry about the audience capture?
I worry about it. I'm relatively comfortable that it's not shaping the program to a great degree, in the sense that at this point, I have a pretty good sense of the things I can say that will upset what I might call my core audience. You know, one of the interesting things, just to briefly go back to the Twitter thing, was those people who were furious with me on Twitter, and they contacted my advertisers, and some advertisers dropped me, and on and on and on. None of them are actually in my audience. None of them are regular consumers of my audience. They were kind of weaponized against me by people who said, hey, look at this. The people who follow Candace Owens on Twitter, other than for their kind of shock value, they're not in my audience. And with my core audience, I know there are things I can talk about that will generate displeasure, I guess you could say, with my audience. Sometimes when I touch the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that will happen. Sometimes on vaccines. There's a portion of my audience that is more generally skeptical of vaccines. Sometimes on some foreign policy issues. Or, you know, I'm not a big fan of Marianne Williamson nor Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s challenges to Joe Biden. Not because I love Joe Biden, but because I don't consider them to be the most serious challengers. I know there's people in my audience who don't like that. They get mad at me about that. And I'm totally okay with that, and that tension with my core audience. So in that sense, I don't feel as though I've had that audience capture take place, but I know it can happen, and I'm very open to being told ways in which it may be happening without me noticing.
So I've made a call for questions on Reddit for this conversation.
Oh God, the fucking people in Lex's Reddit must be the most insufferable pricks on the planet. Lex plus Reddit. Oh my God.
There's a lot of good questions that I'll probably bring up, but one of them was about Marianne Williamson, asking why David thinks she is a garbage candidate, which of course
I've never said.
but perhaps you have more eloquently criticized her. So let's go there.
Sure.
To the 2024 election.
Okay.
So Joe Biden officially announced that he's running again. Donald Trump officially announced that he's running again. If that's the matchup, who do you think wins?
If the election's held today, I think Biden.
Why?
Well, first of all, I believe he won last time. And if I start with the results from 2020, and I think to myself, what has happened since then that would push or pull voters one way or the other, I have a hard time making a case that Trump is in a better position today than he was in November of 2020. So that's kind of my starting point, which is he's
in a much worse position today.
Outcome.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe like in like for like normies or whatever, but you have to consider that like only half of the country's registered and then only half of the country votes. So like it's actually, and then you factor
but most people are normies.
Then you factor in the electoral college, and like it things get real complicated real quick. But I hate horse race electoral politics. And I mostly hate it because of the things I just said, actually, because they don't really mean anything. They're meaningless. Half the people vote, or half the people are registered, only half of them vote, and then whoever get the most votes doesn't even fucking win some of the time. So
some of the time.
Some of the time.
Oftentimes, whoever gets the most vote doesn't win.
Make a case for circumstances having changed in Trump's favor. To give a couple of state level examples, Florida seems to be kind of moving more to the Republican side since 2020, but Trump won that state already in 2020, so it wouldn't really change the outcome. Arizona was close. I think Arizona has moved to the left since 2020, so I don't see Trump taking that one. Wisconsin, I think the same sort of thing applies. So
to be clear, in my lifetime, I think like 15% of the elections have gone to the loser.
That would be kind of the start of my reasoning.
Do you think Joe Biden is a better candidate now than he was in 2020?
I think he's a worse candidate this is going to sound ageist, but I think he's a worse candidate in that he's even older, and there already seems to be an appetite for younger candidates, particularly on the Democratic voting side. So he's going to be 4 years older, and in a sense that could be a liability. However, he also is going to have 4 years of accomplishments. Now, you might not like the things he's done, in which case that would hurt him. But he has started to accumulate a not insignificant number of accomplishments. Some of the big things that are known, Inflation Reduction Act and COVID stimulus, but also less well-known things like a bunch of little tweaks to healthcare, a bunch of little tweaks to student lending. There's been a lot of little things. At the macro level, I don't actually think Joe Biden has that much to do with this, the same way I didn't credit or attack Trump for a lot of the macroeconomic stuff, but inflation has started to come down significantly. The stock market's quite steady. These sort of things. I think looking historically, it's a pretty okay environment for Joe Biden, with the exception that he was already the oldest president to be inaugurated in 2021, and he would beat his own record in January of 2025. And I just don't know how voters are going to see that.
So in terms of just a public human being, how would you compare Trump and Biden? So if I were to give criticism towards Trump, it would be that he's chaotic, maybe to the point of being disrespectful to a lot of different groups, to a lot of different ideas, to a lot of different nations and leaders and all that kind of stuff. And then the criticism towards Biden would be that he, maybe perhaps because of age or any other kind of cognitive capabilities, is not really there mentally as in the way that perhaps you could say like Barack Obama was there, just mentally being able to handle all kinds of aspects of being a
But that's dumb, because the president doesn't actually make most of the executive decisions. His staff does.
I think there is an argument for a president just being too old. But in that case, you have to, like, you're voting on a ticket. You're not voting on one person. So, if you want to vote on Biden and you're worried about his age, then consider if you would vote for Harris.
Like representative of a nation to the world and to the people of that nation. So which, in the competition of personality flaws, which do you think is more powerful?
You've laid out fair and I believe accurate assessments of elements of both of those men.
Yeah.
You haven't weighed in on to what degree you value each of those assessments, which is where I think the kind of meat of this question really is. I don't see, and I know that Biden's going to get us into World War III. World War III doesn't seem to be happening. I don't see the Biden deficits you listed, which I agree with you on. I don't see them as dangerous or threatening to the standing of the United States in this kind of environment with our traditional Western allies and geopolitics, et cetera, in the way that the sort of unhinged personality of Trump combined with his lack of knowledge about most issues is a threat. So for me, if those two are the candidates, Biden would be my choice. Now, are there people I would rather see on the Democratic side? Yes. If I knew the president would be a Republican, can I think of better options than Trump? Absolutely. It's so funny. When in 2012, it was Obama versus Romney, the difference seemed so significant between them. Thinking back, I'm sure I would disagree with Mitt Romney about tax rates, and his views on LGBT I know are different than mine, but it seems, without looking at him with rose-colored glasses, so comparatively benign given the 4 years of Trump. So that's kind of where I come down.
Even McCain and Obama, the differences seemed quite drastic.
Yeah. McCain was interesting because Palin as his running mate opened the door to the sort of cartoonish stuff that we've started to see on the Republican side. Palin, Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, it started going in that direction, which has made the party a bit of a joke, aside from what you believe the tax rate would be, right? You can say taxes are too high, but Jewish space lasers, come on, So, but I agree with you on McCain also.
So going back to the political terms we talked about, where in that spectrum do you place yourself today?
Wait, what does that mean? No, why are you asking the first question again?
Also, now it's not labels, it's a spectrum.
Which of the label do you think captures your political views?
Progressive social democrat.
We already said that.
Is a capitalist. I own my own business. I pay the taxes I'm legally required to pay and not a penny more. And, all those things. That's where I place myself.
Would you place yourself to the left of Joe Biden, for example?
Yes.
Where does AOC fit into that?
It's a good question.
What do you think about AOC?
Why the fuck is he asking
Do you think she
David Pakman that question?
Where does AOC fit into that? I don't know. She's a member of the House of Representatives, you dumb fuck. What do you mean, where does she fit into this?
I mean, ask Pakman, do you agree with the policies of AOC? How about that?
Where does she fit into this? I mean, what the fuck?
I think that if she doesn't run into some kind of scandal, and I don't mean scandal in the sense of some personal impropriety but I mean some kind of major political problem, it seems that she has the staying power to be in American elected politics for a long time. Whether she would even want to be president versus maybe going to the Senate or being governor or whatever the case may be, I have no idea what her ambitions are in that sense. But certainly, like, policy aside, she has this combination of charisma, likability to some, but also something about her personality that angers the people who don't like her in a way that only fuels her sort of presence. Which I think applies to Trump as well. That I do think that she has the potential to have significant staying power in American politics. President, I don't know.
Do you think that's the future of political elections and politics in general? Is people who are able to skillfully piss off the other side, like AOC and Trump did?
I think it's an aspect of it. I think it's also understanding how to communicate policy ideas. Trump, I have things I can praise Trump about if we want to get to that segment at some point. You let me know when that is. But I do think that there are some things Trump is very good at. And this is why it's very hard for me to believe that Ron DeSantis has what it takes.
Crime. He's super good at crime. He's gotten away with it his whole life.
Primary.
Up until very recently, no one even tried to hold him accountable.
Trump has even though he often says very strange things that if you transcribe them, you go, what language is that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. In the moment, the way he relates to adversaries on stage, etc., is very good in that he is very much aware of how it is going to be seen by the audience. And so that's why a lot of times it's more about, doesn't matter that a word salad came out of his mouth, how he immediately responded and related to the person. It was very good. So I think that knowing how to be good when clips are shared all the time, often out of context, is extraordinarily important. Knowing how to use social media, which every election cycle, that means something different, but understanding how to use social media, very important. Those things are absolutely so important. And whether you're able to do a deep dive on the deficit, it's certainly useful, but I would say it's a bad thing. It's becoming less important in terms of figuring out who we want to represent us.
So just lingering on the AOC, and then maybe let's throw in Bernie Sanders on that.
Yeah.
So where do you place yourself, and how do you do the layout of the land of Bernie Sanders, AOC, Joe Biden, and David Pakman?
My instinct is, and I'm going to answer it, the thing that makes this tough is Bernie says he's a democratic socialist. He ran as a social democrat. He didn't run,
but who cares?
That was really
maybe he just disagrees with you on this fucking. Well, he didn't engage in a lot of pedantry, actually. That's kind of what I liked about Sanders' campaign, is he was talking about like policy. Yep.
So I'm going by their public-facing platforms.
I've been listening to him for many, many years, and all the way back to the Tom Hartman show. And I think using the terms as you've been using them, he has, I don't think, ever been a democratic socialist. I haven't heard him speak about socialism. I think I've heard him speak about social programs and the value of social programs throughout the history of the United States and how they've been beneficial.
My understanding is very similar to yours, although there may be stuff from the 70s where he really was talking about bona fide social
shit in the 70s.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You and I, even who weren't around, we were doing stuff in the 70s.
I feel like we did, yeah.
My sense would be, Biden is like center left, and then I'm to the left of that, but maybe just inside of where AOC and Bernie are very, very similar to Bernie. I mean, I identify with a lot of Bernie's ideas. Maybe their implementation I'm more flexible on. I'll give you one example. Medicare for all. One way of trying to get healthcare to everybody, which Bernie's very big on, is you take the current Medicare program, you just eliminate the age limit, make it available to everybody, pay for it through taxation. Interesting. However,
interesting. That's how all the other fucking countries do it.
Yep.
He's just describing every other rich nation, and even some nations that people would call second world, whatever the fuck that means. Even some nations that aren't as rich as the United States, or that aren't that people don't put in the same category as the United States, manage to do it. How does Dave want to do it? Magic?
I'm open to other models if they get everybody healthcare that is good quality and affordable. Singapore has an interesting model. Germany has an interesting model.
Yeah, Germany's called single payer. Germany just has socialized healthcare.
I am more agnostic about how we
so
do it than just saying.
In that sense, he's going even further than Bernie, because does Bernie want to eliminate? I don't actually know this. Does Bernie want to eliminate private insurance?
I don't think Pakman said he wants to eliminate private insurance.
Well, you said Germany is single payer, right?
But single payer doesn't mean that you've outlawed private insurance. A single payer system just means that there's a single payer into the system. You can go buy fucking more insurance if you want. None of these countries, you could go buy supplemental plans in the UK and Canada, any of these countries with government-run healthcare.
Then I think he just agrees with Bernie. Like, why is he saying he's open to more than that? Probably Bernie's open to more than that. Both of you just want everyone to have healthcare. Isn't that the point?
And for the government to pay for it.
Yeah.
Via taxation. Yeah. This is needlessly tedious.
Whether that puts me to the right of Bernie, I don't know, but I'm not like exactly right there on it has to be Medicare for all.
Yeah, that's more of a... That's more just
Bernie chose Medicare for all as the messaging because Medicare is like the most popular second most popular government program in the United States, second only to Social Security.
I mean, if it's not Medicare for all, it will be something that is so identical to Medicare that you could just say it is Medicare for all. Like, it's government funded health insurance.
Dogmatism. So I don't know if that puts you to the left or to the right.
I don't either.
What do you think about we could term manipulation or the corruption in the DNC that perhaps tipped the scales against Bernie in the election?
Do you got 2016 or 2020?
In both cases, his opponent got more votes. That's unfortunate.
Both, I would say, in different. The dynamics there were different with Hillary Clinton, and the pressure from Hillary Clinton as a candidate, and so on. Yeah, what was there? Why didn't Bernie win? I guess is one way to ask.
Okay, I think there's a couple things here. First, the DNC. I'm not a Democrat. Just your audience may not know, I'm just a independent.
Yeah.
I mostly vote for candidates that end up being Democrats. In local elections, often there's no party designation. So, okay, I'm obviously on the left. I'm not denying that. But the Democratic Party as an institution has never really been interesting to me.
You're still a rebel that resists belonging to any institution.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And whether it matters, I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
The DNC and the RNC really are organizations that to some degree exist to justify their own existence, because if they were no longer necessary, they would go away. And
Wait, what?
So they have to assert their value and their importance. They do this in a number of different ways, organizing the way
being political parties?
nominee is chosen, the convention, working with states on everything from redistricting to whatever else the case may be, setting the order of primaries and having some involvement in how that's all going to happen, and also coordinating behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think he's wrong on this.
I
Neither
guess
of them
they
are necessary. They're established.
Right.
Established and necessary are not synonyms.
Don't get in each other's ways. We might see it and say they're picking the winner. There's nothing illegal about them being involved in picking the winner, but we might say it's not in people's interests. I think the 2020 primary was really interesting. Bernie supporter, myself, I started telling my audience after a couple primaries and even before, based on polling and different things, I see a real uphill battle here for Bernie. And it's really important. People in my audience are not the average, union worker in Michigan who is mostly working and raising a family and then goes to vote on primary day and goes to vote on election day. If you spend a lot of time on Reddit and Twitter, you're going to have an inflated sense of Bernie's popularity within the Democratic Party. That was my sense. And to some degree, we saw that in certain states. I don't have the exact primary order and results in front of me or in my head. But
Dave, just say he got clobbered in the South. Dave, he got clobbered in the South. Just say it.
South Carolina was when Joe Biden won and won handily, understood to be because of the larger African-American population in South Carolina. And right around that exact same time, I actually don't remember now whether it was the day after or the day before, some of the smaller Democratic candidates, smaller in terms of support, got out and said, I'm endorsing Joe Biden. And to some degree, of course, it was all organized and timed to help Joe Biden. There's no doubt about that. This is what the DNC does. It's hard for me to be mad at the DNC because this is sort of like, if we believed they were there to be unbiased arbiters and to stay as much on the side as possible, it would make sense to be furious that they've gone against their stated, kind of mandate. But we know that the DNC negotiates and is working behind the scenes and has a favorite. That favorite was Hillary in 2016, 2020. So I share the frustration about the power that the DNC has, but for people who were saying they did something illegal or whatever else the case may be, that doesn't.
I don't think anyone says they did something illegal.
This is part of why. I mean, I would love there not to be this duopoly of Republicans and Democrats, and there's probably 4 major changes that have to happen in order to make that a reality. But I share the frustration of folks while recognizing that Reddit was not accurately representing Bernie's level of popularity.
Still, I wish that the bias wasn't towards the what could be negatively termed the deep state, towards the
get the fuck out of here.
What?
The deep state? Get the fuck out of here. Talking to the fucking Weinsteins too much now.
towards the momentum of the past, which I think Joe Biden kind of represents, versus new ideas. Which is funny to say that Bernie Sanders somehow represents new ideas because he's also an older gentleman.
Well, it's a lot of framing. And
that is a problem of establishment. That's not a problem of deep state.
I don't think
establishment politicians will have establishment policies and will be favored by the establishment.
Right. The deep state.
No duh.
The deep state is the inertia of the government, basically. If I was going to take all of the nasty fucking conspiracy and a lot of times anti-Semitic stuff out of it, it's the inertia of the middle management of the government agencies. If I was going to talk about it, it's that people have been working for the Department of Agriculture for 25 years, and they're probably not going to really change what they do on a day-to-day basis. That's it's just the inertia of government agencies. These people want to make it a conspiracy, but then I guess every fucking large organization is part of a conspiracy. IBM is part of a conspiracy because it's a large organization with inertia and it behaves the way that IBM behaves. It's just that the people working there, otherwise, because you couldn't do it any other way, because otherwise you just have to fire everyone every time the government changed and nothing would work. It'd be like that movie Brazil. Anyway,
I haven't seen it, but yeah, it wouldn't work doing that.
imagine 1984, but nothing works. That's the movie Brazil. I'm not kidding. It's great. It's a fucking great movie. Anyway, we're moving on to the wokeism part because we're at about an hour 5 here. And the wokeism part, I have a feeling we're going to end up stopping it. And from what I've heard so far, I'm guessing that Pakman is going to try to like one foot on either side of the discussion about wokeism here. I don't think he's going to come out like strongly saying that, hey, this is like this is a framing that's being like, my position on it is a framing that's being used to try to get people of color and queer people to shut the fuck up, because that's basically what I think it is. But I don't think Pakman's going to, even in a polite way, suggest that. I think he's going to try to put one foot in both ponds here. I saw you make a face. Do you think that's not going to happen?
I don't know if that is going to happen. I would be very disappointed with him if it did. That's what the face was for.
No, the face was the "you're not wrong" face, or the "you're probably not wrong" face. That was
the "I'm afraid you're not going to be wrong" face.
Let's see what happens.
Another question from Reddit. Both sides are the same, in quotes, is a meme notion that has spread far and wide in American political discourse on the internet. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this notion, and why do you think it is so popular? Now, this Reddit comment also says that podcasts like Russell Brand and Joe Rogan...
He's literally just reading Reddit comments. Like,
this Reddit comment also says that podcasts like Russell Brand and Joe Rogan or the legendary comic George Carlin are examples of big proponents of this notion.
Oh, George Carlin did not tell you that conservatives and liberals are the same. This is absolutely not true.
He very much did not. Can he think of his own questions? Is this why his podcasts are 4 hours long, right? Because he just crowdsources his questions and just asks whatever anyone asks.
All of which I
bet you this is it.
Examples of big proponents of this notion. All of which I kind of disagree with. Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, and George Carlin claim that
both sides are the same.
And use that, all politicians are crooked and they suck and this kind of thing. I don't know if that's true. Maybe George Carlin. Anyway.
No, he's the one. He's the one who absolutely did not do that. He might have said that the politicians aren't working for you, but that he wasn't saying that they were the same. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. What a fuck. This guy probably only ever watched like 3 Carlin routines and never watched like the countless interviews where they asked George Carlin about issues of the day. A lot of times they were social issues, and he was like clearly coming down on the liberal side, like way ahead on gay marriage, way ahead on like rights for queer people more broadly, just way ahead, like way ahead of even comedy on that stuff.
To what degree do you think, do you agree with this notion that both sides are the same? Left and right, the crooked, corrupt politicians, they do what politicians do.
I don't agree that it's the same. I think there are different factions that like to say that for different reasons. There are some individuals who want to present themselves as kind of being above.
It's a vote suppression tactic.
And so I call it enlightened centrism.
Do you mean that positively or negatively?
No, I mean it negatively. Yeah, it's a bit.
Oh well, good. Fuck yeah! All right, that's the first thing. Fuck, thanks, Dave. Maybe at this point he's gotten so worn down by Lex, because now we're 2 hours and 15 minutes into the conversation. Maybe he's starting to get a little annoyed. I know I would.
That I am not going to fall for being a Democrat or a Republican. Mm-hmm. I can see that these are just two sides of the same coin, equally bad, lying to every. Okay, so that's one. It's sort of like it's popular at dinner parties in some circles to go, I'm both all these politicians, left and right. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that it's often used when your side has really stepped in it. Mm-hmm. It's a popular way to acknowledge that your side has done something wrong, but while framing it as it's not uniquely wrong and it's not worse than what anybody else does. And I find that it's one of the lamest and most kind of cringe-inducing things to hear because of what comes next. And usually what comes next is not a good, accurate criticism of something that took place and a discussion of how to solve a real problem that we have. I find it a conversation stifler. It also is used to kind of suppress voter turnout, not actively. It's not that the people who say that go around saying don't vote. But the idea, of course, is the more people that believe that it doesn't really make a difference who you vote for, it's going to suppress voter turnout. And I want voter turnout to be as high as possible, not as low as possible. So I also dislike it for that reason.
So is it
It
possible
is a
to say
voter
that
suppression
one side is
tactic.
worse than the other?
Anyone who says that is either falling for a voter suppression tactic or using a voter suppression tactic.
Modern current political climate.
Listen, I'm a person on the left. I'm not pretending to come here as and not knowing that my view is biased because I'm a person of the left. If you ask Ben Shapiro, he'll tell you something different. I think in 2023, sum total, the influence of the American right wing, if the American right wing were to get everything it wants, it would be a horrifying reality. If the left were to get everything it wants, we'd have to figure out a few things, including exactly how we pay for certain programs. But they're mostly noble goals. And I believe that they are more supportive of an individual.
Oh, the rich would be
what they
fucked if we got everything we wanted. Oh my God, that would be so fucked.
Well, you're talking about, you're individualizing this again. The American left isn't you, HK. It's everybody from Nancy Pelosi out to seize the means of production.
Sure, but I'm talking about like if the progressive left was able to get what we wanted, it would go back to the tax rates of like the 50s where the top earners were paying like 90% taxes. Which they should.
In life and how they want to live, and is more in line with the idea of freedom and liberty.
Yeah, you're right though. If I had my way, they wouldn't just be fucked, they'd be eaten.
Self-determining what they want to do in life and how they want to live, and is more in line with the idea of freedom and liberty than what the right is currently proposing. That's my view. And of course, people will disagree with me. They'll say, no, we get to freedom and liberty the way that the right wants to do it. Okay, well, we can have that conversation.
So I think you've implied in your answer, it was kind of focused on policy. It felt like it was focused on policy. There's other stuff that people worry about.
Sure.
Particularly with the left, what may be termed the woke mind virus. Right?
Where have I heard? Who's using that term a lot now? I'm trying to think.
I'm not sure. Not sure where it comes up. But the cultural aspect of this,
sure,
that, if you give a lot of power to people on the left, like, as you gave as an example, there would be a lot of kind of censorship and suppression of speech and a kind of dividing up of a society of who's allowed to, basically a reallocation of resources not based on merit. But
I swear to God, Lex Fridman's mom cuts his hair.
So hold on. Right now in this conversation, if you're the interviewee, you ask, is this your position?
Yep.
Is this what you believe? Are you telling, like, who is taking the position that you're describing? Are you taking it? Who am I responding to?
To some extent, it doesn't matter. Like, he could just be playing devil's advocate, which is fine, but he should disclose that.
That's why I would ask, are you taking this position? Nobody ever asks Lex this.
Of high ethical notions of what is right. And only a very small percent of the population gets to decide what is fair, what is right. Okay. Which is,
we already have a small portion of the population deciding fair. Okay.
Yes. But I don't know how many different ways I can say kind of a negative characterization of folks on the left when we're now comparing it, just as to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
So is that something that you worry about? So setting policies aside, wokeism.
Yes.
There you go. He's just playing devil's advocate.
Conversation. So let's two sides of it. Okay. We have new polling that seems to suggest
I should put some air quotes around that. Just playing devil's advocate.
We have new polling that seems to suggest so-called wokeism is kind of more popular in the United States than anti-wokeism. and I'll tell you what I mean by that. This is the less interesting part. We'll go to the more interesting part second. Sometimes what people mean by wokeism is an overreaction to a perceived injustice that goes beyond what would be fair and equitable. There was this really interesting poll, and it asked questions like, for example, do you believe society has gone too far, not far enough, or just about the right amount in dealing with issues affecting the trans community? The woke position, which is society hasn't gone far enough, was far more popular than we've gone too far. Now, the right-wing media narrative is we've gone way too far. This is out of control. And there are lots of other similar answers. It's not a huge margin. A lot of these are like 58 to 42, 60 to 40. It's not like 90 to 10, but by a small margin, the so-called woke perspective of we actually haven't yet done enough to fix some of these issues is a little bit more popular. So if we went back to DeSantis, this is part of why I think DeSantis's anti-woke agenda.
That also, so one thing he's not bringing up here is the discrepancy between the two sides in regards to age.
Okay, well that's fine.
Millennials.
I don't think that I don't know if the poll that he's talking about even collected that data.
Maybe not the specific poll he's talking about, but I have seen either the poll he's talking about or other polls that essentially the kind of like quote woke positions unquote are extremely popular in Gen Z, and they're very popular in the millennial generation. And then, you know, as you age, as the generations, you know, get older, they're less popular. I'm not saying like as a single person ages, it becomes less popular, but you know, it's less popular with the older generations.
What I noticed actually is that we're not the three positions were gone too far. We're more or less on the right trajectory, or we haven't gone far enough. I think like what's left out here is the people who think we're more or less on the right trajectory are going to tend to be, we would tend to call them at least like maybe not huge supporters of woke, however the fuck you would fucking put that, but they're like okay with the way things are. Like they're like, okay, we are adding, you know, protections for trans people, and I think we should do that. That they're going to tend to be more on the side of the woke. And so, and I bet that that's like a non-insignificant portion of the people when asked the question. They're like, I think we're kind of on the right trajectory on like trans issues or LGBTQ plus issues. And I think that's going to get left out of here is that you know, progress is being made and most people think it's good.
Possibly. Yeah.
Really interesting result. I wonder how the questions are framed, but it's still interesting nevertheless, no matter what, to hear that majority of people in America are woke, not in the negative sense of the word.
The poll didn't use the term woke.
Right.
Not in the negative sense of the word.
The term has
again, like
kind of been
I don't
perverted.
mean to insult you, but you're a Democrat, right? Like, why
4
the
years
fuck would
ago,
I find
when the
like
term was started to be used, I would have said, oh yeah, woke just means like I have become aware of problems that are bigger than any one person can fix for themselves that relate to the system. I think that's what, and we might disagree on which problems fall into that category, but like it was kind of benign. I think now it just means like outrageously left-wing, maybe even with socialist or Marxist undertones. It's become a pejorative at this
But
point.
also like bullies, like people,
Sure. Censorers.
yeah, but people that go around calling others.
Oh, you can tell Lex is giving away the fucking game here. You know, like he crossed his arms and started like getting a little agitated here. Lex is giving away the game here. We know what his position is on this, right? We can clearly, even if we'd never seen any of his content before, he's given away the game here. But he's clearly agitated to the extent that
he
Lex
just
is
wants
capable.
to use the T-slur without someone calling him a bigot.
To the extent that Lex is capable of showing emotion, he's clearly agitated here.
Yep.
Oftentimes, without any proof or justification.
Fair.
But that's
I don't know
a few
if
folks on
Lex
Twitter
actually
were
wants to
saying,
use the T slur. I was being facetious.
like the polling is starting to show that like no, there's still most of the Americans still care about these issues and want to improve and want to make progress.
I think that's the case, and they want to do it in a genuine way that doesn't suppress or oppress anybody. But now let me get to what degree do I think that when it goes too far is a problem? Mm-hmm. It absolutely exists. We can find instances of where this exists on the left. I've been told many times that as a Jewish Argentinian immigrant to the United States, I actually don't qualify as oppressed enough because Jews are privileged now in the US and my family had just enough money to leave Argentina. So there's this kind of like oppression Olympics thing.
Stop it. No. Yo, people meet you and they're like, oh, that's a white guy. That's it. That's like, I don't know if he's been told the thing that he's saying, but like the people meet Pakman and they're like, that's a white guy.
Yep.
To comment, for example, like a topic in the Latino community now is, are you familiar with Latinx? Mm-hmm. Okay. In Spanish, there's an analogous movement where words by their nature sort of like have a gender. So like the word for friend is amigo. But if it's a woman, you would say amiga. So right from there, you can tell the gender that we're talking about. And if it's a mixed group, you say amigos. It's the male with an S, but it could include both. There's a movement now which wants to do away with that and put the letter E in. It's a new word, okay? It's a gender neutral word. Amigues, totally new. I don't like that.
But who cares? It's not your decision.
My family uses it, and I think it's kind of like a strange imposition from someone kind of with a solution in search of a problem. I've been told...
Is that an imposition?
Long ago. And like your English
is it an imposition for someone else to use a word?
Strange imposition from someone kind of with a solution in search of a problem. I've been told you moved to the US long ago and like your English is good and like you look white. And so like you don't get to weigh in on that. That I think is an example, if I understand correctly, of the type of thing you're talking about. I'm kind of being bullied. I'm fine. I'm surviving.
You're not being bullied. You're being told that you don't have the experience of a Latinx person because you're white. Like whiteness isn't something you get to choose and it's not in your genes. We've talked about this over and over and over again. How does society perceive David Pakman? He white.
Yeah, whiteness is something that society thrusts upon you, whether you like it or not in any particular scenario.
Also, like very few people use the term Latinx. I think it's mostly used in academic settings or like in government communications, right? Like it's not, most people don't people don't use it in conversation. That's fine.
And being bullied over it and disqualified and saying you don't get to speak on this issue. All of that stuff, I am completely against. And I tell people on the left, we're actually hurting our own movement with this stuff. I just don't think it's as big as some others believe it to be.
You don't think it's an existential threat to our civilization?
No, I don't know.
And no. I mean, look, we've got a Biden administration. I see Biden as center left. Those who see Biden as extreme far left, this stuff has played almost no role whatsoever in the first 2+ years of his administration.
Well, there's people that see him far left.
There's people on the right who, I mean, Trump says Biden's a Marxist, socialist, communist.
Lex is a moron.
I don't think that would stick.
Like he knows that. If he doesn't know that, then he's an absolute fucking moron. But if he does know that and he's just doing a devil's advocate thing right there, I don't even know what he was trying to do. Then he's just fucking weird. So either he's a moron or he's weird.
Says it at every rally. Yeah. Which I'm so jealous that you don't watch these things.
I love how deeply researched you are in Trump. I can only imagine how good your Trump impression is at this point.
It's not very, sadly, it's not good.
It's not, all right.
No, impressions are a thing you can do or you can't do.
One other thing on that.
I'll cop to that being genetic.
Just to talk about it a little bit, we haven't dealt with it much. the trans issue has become huge, I believe, because the right is obsessed with it. The right is very much not concerned with gay men anymore. It used to be that gay men is like, oh, we have to stop gay men from adopting and unnatural and pedophiles. Now it's trans, it's drag shows, etc. I do think that there is a fair question to say, how do we deal with trans women?
I think he's wrong on that. The right is very much concerned with gay men.
Right, but they're not messaging on it as much because they've lost on that issue.
I mean, the Don't Say Gay bill was literally about, like, solely about sexual orientation being discussed in school.
Small, short list of sports.
Well, not solely. It included gender issues as well. So,
oh, here's Dave going to talk about the sports, and I'm going to give the position of this network, and it is by edict that the sports authorities, the governing bodies of those sports, can decide that for themselves without too much of my input. Just real clear, that's the position of Echoplex Media.
How do we deal with trans women in a very small, short list of sports? That's real. Okay.
They do it without you.
I go, okay, we have all issues. We have issues related to gender and sexual orientation. We have issues related to trans. Within that, we have specifically sports. You can eliminate from that trans men. Nobody's worried, right, about women, biological women who are trans men. And then when you say it's only in certain sports that it matters, hey, I'm right there. I think it's a complicated question. I don't know how we deal with it. I would ask leagues that have experience with this already and whatever.
Oh, he has the right
problem
answer.
I have is pretending that the vanguard of left-wing politics right now is trying to force trans women into sports. It's like, it's just not the big issue that the right is reacting as if it were.
But perhaps because of the right, it's forcing the left to continue discussing it. I mean, I feel like it, even in institutions, even at universities, it feels like these ideas of diversity, inclusion, and equity are taking some of the air out of the room of what a university should also care about, which is merit. And it feels like reprioritization is going a little too far the other way.
So it's not it gives you nothing of merit to overcome challenges faced because of diversity
Or because of discrimination.
Is that what he's saying?
You mean because of discrimination?
Yeah, because of discrimination. Is that what he's saying? He's saying that
Well, he's not.
if a black person reaches a goal and a white person reaches a goal, then they must have given the exact same amount of effort because they both reached the goal, right? That's essentially what he's saying.
Well, it's built into it's generally built into the argument that he's poorly making, but also not making. Yes, I think.
Yeah, even though it's demonstrably not true, it is much easier, depending on other factors, given everything else the same, it is easier for a white person to reach higher academia than a black person. Like, we know that. As a fact, in the United States, it is easier for white people in academia in general.
Meaning prioritizing this kind of amorphous concept of diversity.
It's not amorphous.
Moving away is giving power to people that don't care about merit and they just want to bully people with a big stick that says racism or sexism or anti-diversity. And it kind of suffocates the people that care about merit, about meritocracy, about inspiring people from all kinds of backgrounds to succeed. And it's just, you kind of observe that. I'm sure that happens in all kinds of institutions. And the concern, I
feel like meritocracy is one of these words that is slowly becoming a racist dog whistle.
Generally, yes. Sexist as well.
Yeah.
Are concerned about, at scale, what impact does that have on a society when there's so much conversation about
this isn't a question.
racism.
Lex is making a statement.
and a pressure not to talk about
He is the person who we made up the word quest statement for, if you remember.
merit. Like, who's the actual good person in the room, the best person in the room?
Generically, that's a concern to me. The degree to which it's happening at different
Who is the
institutions.
best person in the room? Is that what he just asked?
Racism and a pressure not to talk about merit. Like, who's the actual good person in the room, the best person in the room?
Generically, that's
There is no best person. If you're in a room, and you're like trying to figure out who the best person in the room is, it probably ain't you.
It's definitely not you.
In fact, you're a pretty good candidate for being the worst person in the room. Is if you're in a room, you're like, oh, there's 15 people here at this dinner party. I wonder who the best person here is.
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as a best person in the room, but I think there's definitely a worst person in the room. And if you're thinking about the former, you are the latter.
a concern to me. The degree to which it's happening at different institutions, I think, is worthy of exploration. I know people who work in academia that are getting out of academia because they don't like the environment on their campuses for exactly the reason you're saying. So it exists. There is no question.
Well, good. Get the fuck out then.
That the idea
times change, baby. People quit, but people quit jobs for all kind of reasons.
Is maybe not necessarily the goal, in the sense that when you talk about
I feel like if you're upset that there are too many black people at your university, you should leave that university.
Or even
in fact, you should just go over to Antarctica.
Well,
and just live as a hermit over there.
The problem with this too is we don't know what Dave's anecdotal friend, what their problem is really, right? Maybe they're like, it could be any number of things, right? We don't know, and we can't know because this is Dave's anecdotal friend. But I think this is about as good a place to leave it because we're a little bit over here and nobody's even going to hear this part of the podcast. But I do want to say something that I think I've only ever said in the post game, and I hope everybody's going to indulge me a minute. Why is it that somebody who's a tenured professor doesn't have to follow the rules? Why? I don't think that this is, maybe I'm phrasing this wrong. Why is it that we throw a pity party when a tenured professor is creating a shitty environment for the students and other staff and they're forced out? Do we throw a pity party for somebody who's middle management at IBM when they do that? Or do we be like, that guy was a dick? Why is it that academia is the place where we've decided that we're going to be upset that somebody quit their job because they don't like the way the wind is blowing? I don't understand it. I've never understood it. I've asked people in academia about it, and one of the answers is I would never answer that question on the record because, which is fair enough, right? They're in academia and they don't want to answer the question. But I've also gotten that this is like a position where you shouldn't be afraid of losing your job based on your opinion. And I'm like, well, every time we find out that some of these people have been fired from these jobs because of their opinion, it also turns out that they were treating people they work with like shit. That Peter Boghossian, for example, he was like, I was canceled for my opinion. First of all, he resigned out of his own free will. But secondly, we found out later that he was horrible to work with. He was absolutely terrible. He treated people there like shit. And the only people, funny enough, when we've had this story go down that I didn't hear that about was Brett Weinstein and Heather Hying. I never heard anybody say that they were actually shitty to the students or other staff at the university. It could just be that nobody said anything or whatever, or maybe they were genuinely pretty nice to people and just decided to do it dumb. But I don't understand why it is we do this. People who work in customer service can get fired from their job for not being super extra double polite enough.
Yep.
For not taking abuse from a customer with a smile. And you know what I'm saying? So and if somebody from academia that's out there that hears this takes a different position than mine and would like to talk about it sometime, I'd be glad to talk to you. I'm not a member of academia. And I'd probably maybe even see if I could get an academic on who takes my position. But I don't think that it's because, again, he immediately brought up academia. David Pakman did here, right? He's like, well, I know people at university who, moved for another job because they didn't like how it was going there. And it's like, well, I don't know, maybe fucking Maybe it wasn't the right place for them anymore. Maybe they should go work somewhere else. I don't understand why it's like a tragedy. These are probably all white dudes too in their 60s or whatever. I don't know why it's a fucking tragedy when a white dude over 50 is no longer a fucking professor. Can somebody tell me why this is the biggest fucking cultural tragedy that ever happened?
Yeah, I'm ready to unshed some tears for them.
Right. That's like the unclap.
Yeah. Just suck a few tears back up in.
Go jogging a little bit so you build a little bit of sweat up under your eye and then suck that shit right back into your eye.
Yeah.
And I do understand that people should have academic freedom and whatnot, but I don't think that I just don't think that a lot of the cases where these people are forced out is one of these things where they think the wrong thing. I think there's a big difference between what you think and what you're researching and your behavior. If you're at one of these universities trying to research like group differences in IQ, I guarantee you're treating people there like shit.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a big difference between like giving the freedom to research controversial ideas and being allowed to be a bigot. Like there are things that are settled. And if you're like, no, we need to unpack these things that were settled back in the like 50s. Like, no, we don't. In fact, because you want to, you can leave.
Right. And like, I don't know, like the other thing is these people all get canceled from the university and then they make way more money than they ever made at the university. Like, my God, you think Jordan Peterson wants to go back to the University of Toronto and take that salary instead of what he's doing? Get the fuck out of here.
Yep.
So I guess that's the show. I had my thing at the end, so you can do the actual work of reading the show out, HK.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you're joining on the podcast and you would like to, check us out on the live show. We stream this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. And if you're listening live, you will hear our show after the show, The Red Light, right after the music. If you want to check out our other shows, you can do that at echoplexmedia.com. And if you'd like to support us, you can do that on both eplex.store, an awesome way to support us, and patreon.com/echoplex. And if you're listening live, stick around after the song for Red Light. This is Boomers by Periscope.